Yes,
The minutes are being kept by recording. Is this video as well as audio recording that the minutes are being kept as?
yes.
Thank you. Val Humble present. Is Karen Meyer here? There she is.
Karen Myers is here.
And Mary Helen.
Mary Helen's here.
Kathy Kellen's here, right?
Kathy Kellen is here.
And our resigned member Leslie Sawyer is also here, I see.
Hi, Leslie.
Is there any public testimony?
Leslie, is there anything you'd like to say attending as a member of the public?
Just that I want to keep track of what's going on.
Thank you, Leslie.
Good to hear. If there's no other public testimony, the next item on the agenda is finances and contracts report from Janet.
Hey, Janet Olson, Finance Manager. So we have sent out the contract report, which will show the new contracts that have been written in the month of December for Pen 2. If anybody has any questions about the contracts report that we've sent out, any new contracts? Okay, then we'll move on. Then we also have the 21-22, the year-to-date financial report. And Ben was so kind as to put this together from all of the data that he is working on right now. But it shows your 18-19 Pen 2 actual, the 19-20 actual, 2021 actual, and then where we are for 21-22 and this year's current budget and where the budget is remaining. It looks like, we're doing well on the assessment revenue. We have not gotten all of the direct bills out yet, but we will be getting those done in the next couple of weeks. And actually, we look great so far. We're still early in the year. But you can tell that we have 74% of our materials and services budget still available. We only have 18% of the total revenues, which is good. That means we've collected the good percentage of our money right now, our revenue. And does anybody have any questions that we can answer?
If I may back up just a bit, I was a little slow in finding the contract report, and I was a little unclear on what the Winterbrook planning contracts are for. Do you have a moment to tell us what that is?
Colin, do you want to jump in on that one? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, so Winterbrook Planning is on for planning support for things that we need around permitting, land use review, and other things that support both project development. So as our project managers are developing projects, they need to adhere to permitting requirements, but also things that we need consultation on for projects like the Portland Metro Levee study and reviewing different types of land use, City of Portland otherwise, and then also for our development review. So they're on call and we're able to use them for planning services.
So they're specialists in knowing about planning limits and rules and stuff.
Yep, land use, permitting, and especially around environmental requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may just give a shout out to our entire finance team, both the procurement, budget, and finance side. They've been really working their tails off to get the money out the door and come up with new and streamlined ways for us to manage our money. And Ben's done a great job sort of summarizing multiple years of data across multiple districts. And they keep it straight, and the audits are looking really good so far. So I don't know that they get a shout out very often, and they keep the wheels turning. And so I just want to thank Janet and Ben and Jim and Nicole and the whole team for really keeping us all working. So thanks, you guys.
I join you in that. Thank you, folks.
I was going to say, I'll do the virtual shout out. You probably wouldn't want me to shout, but these reports however, and whoever was all involved in them, were easy to understand for a non-accounting person. And Janet's always provided really good information and answered questions all along the line. And I think it's very helpful because the ordinary citizen can understand them and you don't have to be an accountant. So thank you very much for that. Karen probably understands them, but.
And very briefly, I don't recall, there's enough boards that I can't remember who's met whom, but we do have Keith Hobson, who is interim CFO with us. Keith's been with us for 5 weeks or so and comes highly recommended from Tualatin Valley Parks and Rec and other positions. And he's been a great asset for us over the last 6 weeks and will be with us at least through the remainder of the fiscal year. So we're really grateful to have him helping us out. Thanks, Keith. I won't take any more time, Mr. Chair, my regrets, but I just felt like it was important to acknowledge a great team.
Yes, I appreciate that. Is there anything else on this item of the agenda, the finance and contracts report?
The only other thing I might add is that the Penn 2 audit is completed and it was submitted to the Secretary of State, which is a requirement. So that'll be coming out, and we're scheduling the auditors to come out and do a report at one of the format meetings this spring to report out about the financial status of all the districts for all the boards. Kind of what we did last year. Same thing.
Okay. Okay, then moving on to item D on our agenda, the board vacancy.
Yeah, so it's been.
Emily,
Yeah, it's been a couple
Go
of
ahead.
months that we have not had a chance to address the vacancy from Leslie's seat. And you'll recall when Leslie resigned, she suggested Eric Molander as her replacement. But in the meantime, I know I've heard from a handful of board members of other prospective replacements or also other outreach techniques that we might want to use just to make sure that there's kind of equitable recruitment strategies. And so I just wanted to leave some space on this agenda for you all to discuss next steps and what you'd like to do as far as the vacant seat.
does any?
I have a question. Sorry. This is Kathy.
Yeah.
I had a question about timing with the sort of fast tracking the new district. What are we looking at in terms of duration for someone to come in? Would it be 2 years? Is that right?
Well, I don't like to gamble, but we should know more by the end of March whether the legislation and the amendments to the authorizing legislation for the urban district are going to pass. If they pass, it gives us the opportunity to probably at least make an effort to set up the new district beginning in 2023. We still have some work to do to understand what dissolution of the legacy districts means and how long that will take and what role the legacy boards will play in that. But I think you should consider probably through at least the calendar year of 2023 and potentially longer if we're not successful in the legislative session this spring. Winter,
Okay.
I guess it's winter.
Thanks. Okay.
We should know probably by the end of February where we stand in terms of the legislation. That would be the goal.
Great. Thank you.
I would think the issue would be getting a financing system set up that's robust and will work. Any other comments by?
Yes,
any board
I
member?
do. I have a couple comments. Eric Molander's on the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District as a neighborhood representative. So he would have all the information, and I'd like to see more people involved and a more equitable search go on as opposed to, and Leslie, you've been wonderful. I respect your recommendations, but I just think since there's all this work going on in equity and diversity, sorry? Oh, that we should explore those opportunities. I know that the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District is doing a search for viable candidates, and not all of them will be selected. So there might be somebody there that can be a representative of a resident landowner like we do with Kathy. Jubitz has expressed an interest, but because of this pandemic and their workload and what they've had to do, this is not a real high priority, but Radha Wada has committed to getting back to me by next week because they always had a representative. There's a FedEx representative, Pia, I forget her last name. She's interested just because of the impacts that flooding could have. So I'd like to explore the businesses. Corky's exploring it with the Columbia Corridor Association of businesses in the area, and we really don't have a business representative, but 60% of the land is commercial and business. And so I think we need to expand our search, and if we can do that, and I'll commit to putting more effort into it in the next month and report back in February when we know more about the state legislation, the need and long-term effect. That my recommendation would be that we table this till February after we can get a response back from some of the businesses and Corky's exploration with the Columbia Corridor Association. And Eric is well informed with his meetings with the Urban Flood Safety, Water Quality, and he's also on the Revenue Committee. So he'll be able to keep apprised, probably even more than we are, with his involvement with the urban district.
Karen,
Can
you
I-
have to- oh, Kathy?
Yeah, I'm just curious what the recruitment process has looked like in the past. And I'll say at the outset that my preference is to open any kind of recruitment as widely as possible, particularly in trying to advance equity goals. I know the districts have espoused that would be an essential first step, but I'd love to hear what historically has been done.
So typically we rely on the board members to do any recruitment. So thinking through your networks and contacts, and then generally I have provided kind of like offers to meet one-on-one or walk through with people what the requirements would be. And generally in my experience, as far as promoting just publicly, it hasn't been very successful. Penn 2 might be a different case just because you do have so many community members. It might be easier to find someone from like a social media posting or something like that. But then also every year at the landowner meeting, obviously we talk about who's on the board, and there's usually elections. And so that usually gins up a little bit of interest, and then we kind of keep in touch with anyone who expresses interest and follow up there. But right now, as Mary Helen mentioned, we are trying to fill a couple of seats on the urban district board. And so we do have we similarly just asked those board members to send us a list of anyone that they thought would be qualified. And now staff at board direction have just been reaching out to those people and like letting them know what it would take and asking, just kind of like trying to engage. So that's generally how we approach it. But because it's supposed to be a board member driven recruitment, so that staff aren't like handpicking the board members. So usually we rely on you all to find the contacts, but then we can provide any information that they need or like meet with people to help them understand what they're getting themselves into.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I'd just like to say, my personal reaction is we haven't in the past had a surfeit of folks willing to take these jobs, and having a volunteer, as it were, appeals to me. It seems to me that we definitely need to consider Eric because he's willing and able. Karen, it looked like you had something you were about to say.
Well, I agree with Mary Helen, her getting some business people involved.
And we have had Jubitz better represented in the past than they are now. That's true.
Yeah.
So is the sense of the board that we should table it till next month and see if there are people who wish to take up this responsibility?
That would be my preference.
You're muted, Mary Helen. Mary Helen, you're muted.
Here I am talking and saying I'm sorry. I, I'm not saying don't consider Eric, because he's shown an interest and wants to be involved. I'm just saying that for the equity standards and a broader reach and a broader representation, I don't think we've done a good job. And the people that come to our landowners meeting are usually less than 30 and the same people. So I would just like to see if there's other people out there and get them involved in this water quality district, because and the knowledge of it and lay the basis. And that was my whole point, is there might be somebody out there that has talents that would be beneficial to us. And not that Eric doesn't have those talents, but I'm trying to extend the involvement in the drainage districts and knowledge of, because we still have people in our neighborhood that don't know what the levee is and don't know what the drainage district is and don't know anything about it. So I would like to involve not people that don't know, but at least the ability to reach those kinds of people in different ways.
Right, and one of my main concerns was to keep the Bridgeton area well informed, but your point is well taken. They are pretty well informed now, unlike perhaps in the past. Are there any other comment? I guess, do we need anything more than a consensus that we're going to table this until next month?
No, that sounds good. And then I guess I just will note that you all are planning to do some outreach and then next month have a report if you've found anyone else that is interested, and we can take next steps from there.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, since it's sort of a first come, first serve process, it sounds like, that it would be valuable to come to agreement that if there is going to be consideration of one candidate, that we know for sure that there aren't others in the wings. So it sounds like there are a number of leads that are being pursued. And so being able to set a firm deadline, if we need to seriously consider bringing someone on, because we need to fill that spot, that other folks know. And so that we're creating a more level playing field.
Are you suggesting that perhaps as contacts are made, that Emily notifies all by email or something like that?
Well, I guess I'm not sure what the best process is. I think it would be not moving on a single candidate unless we know who else is interested, right? So it's not just a first come, first serve sort of deal. So can we wait if we come back in February and Mary Helen has, like 2 possible leads? Are we okay waiting another 2 months to see how those play out and bring everyone to the table for consideration at the same time? Is there urgency? I guess I just don't know how to make sure that more than one person is considered.
And it's definitely entirely up to the board as far as how you'd like to approach it. It's sort of at your guys' determination. You can appoint someone. And so if you don't feel like you have the candidates that you'd like, you can hold on to it as long as you like. And then I would have to double check what the term is for Leslie's seat. I don't recall the last time we had an election, but odds are, since we haven't had quorum for the last, I think, 2 board landowner meetings, that in October, this seat would be up for election at the landowner meeting also. So
Okay.
That's something to think about. Is really, it's up to you all if you'd like to appoint someone. If you can choose, you don't have to fill the seat by any, like, there's no time constraint. It's all sort of what you decide.
Okay. Well, it's ambiguous enough to keep it ambiguous.
Well, I wanted to ask this. And I don't want to be just Mary Helen out recruiting, but if we find a candidate, I don't feel well equipped enough to eloquently describe the role, the function. Can we say, if you're interested, contact me, I'll say contact me or Emily Robertson, sort of like we've done. Is that fine?
I think that is fine. And I would just loop you all in on sort of how that contact is going.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, we stand ready as your team to offer background briefings or have a coffee, or if there's someone you'd like us to try and identify, contact information on your behalf. but we're not going to take any proactive action without approval from the board, because it really is the board's job on this board stuff, and we take that seriously. So
Okay,
Okay, I believe then that we will table that issue until next month. Item E on the agenda, the Portland Metro Levy Study and the cost share. Mark is on the agenda for that, I understand. I don't see, there he is.
Greetings. I'm actually going to let Jamie open us up, but I am trying to share my screen. I think I need some help, Emily, wizard of all things Zoom. Okay, there we go. That should do it. Great. Can everyone
Yeah.
see that?
There they are. Perfect, Mark. Thank you. Well, good morning, board. I'm Jamie Damon with Kearns and West. I've been supporting the districts here over the last, year and a half now on a number of topics, including the Portland Metro Levee System federal project. So Mark and I have an update for you today about where we are. We've got a little mini agenda for our half-hour time slot that we've got. So Mark, if you want to go to the next slide. So we've got a general project update for you, as we try to do at every board meeting. And then the focus of the conversation today is there's a staff recommendation around the cost allocation for PED. So we want to present that to you and have some conversation with you about that. And then just give you a little bit of a heads up of what's coming up next. So if you want to go to the next slide. So for project updates, some of this is old news, but we always like to just start out with kind of where things are at. So Mark, I think you had something to say about federal and state advocacy, is that right?
Yeah, and if there's anything else to add, Evan, please feel free to step in. But I just want to provide a brief update that we recently, that the congressional delegation provided their support for the funding of 3.5 years of PED to Congress through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that's the big package that's being pushed through Congress, or that's been pushed through Congress. I also understand that Jim's been invited to present to the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So all of our efforts to, obviously we have to figure out how to pay for PED for our share, but we also have to make sure that PED is funded for the core. So this is what these are some of the things that go into that effort. I also wanted to just give an update on the City of Portland task force related to the PMLS. Thanks to everyone's support, we signed it, and all the city bureau directors signed it. So we are moving forward. We've had several meetings. Most of them have been fairly informational so far. We expect to continue to provide you updates at these individual board meetings and formats. And of course, at some point, Jim will be providing recommendations that he's vetted for your consideration. In some cases, there'll be precursory thoughts, and we'll just sort of take a temperature of how things feel. We expect a lot of decisions to be wrapped up into an IGA with the City of Portland towards the end of, or towards middle of spring, beginning of summer. At some point, we'll have an IGA that shares resources between the partners and delineates any other decisions. So, okay, that's my brief update.
Great. And so additional partner meetings are occurring as we're trying to continue to explore funding and needs. And so those are all happening. And then just a reminder, we mentioned this at the last time we met, but it's worth mentioning again because of the amount of information that's available. Is all the project information is on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website. And it's really, the whole report, you can go and you can really take a pretty deep dive into the information that they have there. So it's worth mentioning that, again, that this is a really important resource for everybody.
And if you need a lifeguard to pull you back to shore as you dive deep, or you need to know which lane is safe to swim in, just you can reach out to myself or other staff.
Way to play on that analogy, Mark. Good job. Go to the next slide. And actually, is there a slide right before this?
Sorry. Yes. I don't know why it jumped.
I don't know either.
There we go.
There we go. So, so I want to set the stage. So when Mark and Evan and Colin and I, we were kind of going back over the conversations we've had with all of you about cost allocation. We've been having this discussion with all of you and all the boards for about a year. And, and as we've gotten smarter about what the costs are, and that we've gotten more information about what the possibilities are in terms of, what the actual cost share is for PED and what that starts to look like. We've been able to narrow down the discussion. We've been able to talk with many of you to follow up on issues and concerns. But we've been with this topic now for about a year. So none of this should be a big surprise. And so what we want to do with this agenda item is really remind you of sort of a couple of key things of where we've been, and then really focus in on what we know today and what that means in terms of a staff recommendation around the cost allocation. So that's sort of the big stage setting. So Mark, if you want to go to the next couple slides, they're really just reminder slides. And so this is not new information about, this is just what the PED costs are, in year 1 and year 2, what the estimate is for the districts, the 35% cost share for the first 2 years of PED, and then what it looks like moving out. So that's just the background. No new numbers here, right, Mark? Nothing. Okay.
Nope, numbers have been fixed.
Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. Again, this is a reminder slide of the context. And so we've been talking about a couple of things. We've been talking about a cost methodology, and then we've been talking about how to, where the monies can come in from. And these are all the different options we've had on the table about where the monies can come in. And we've really been hanging our hopes on the state levy grant fund. And we have some more information to share with you about that. But you can also see, we're having our partner contribution conversations to figure out how we can meet multiple benefits and what that looks like moving forward. And then also taking a deeper dive to another deep dive conversation, also taking a closer look at all of your budgets and what that what your ability is to be able to cover those costs. And so we've gotten quite a bit smarter here in the last few months about all of this. So if you want to go to the next slide, Mark. So we're going to start with updates since we met last. And I'm going to turn this over to Colin because he can describe this a lot better than me. But the first update is, I know that Jim and Colin and Mark and others have met with individual board members around, to work through a number of questions and concerns and provide information and try to close the gap of where everybody's at. So those conversations occurred over the last couple months. But then we've got some information to share about Business Oregon. So Colin, you want to do that?
Yes, thanks, Jamie and Mark. Very quickly, just wanted to go through what we've learned about the Business Oregon State Levy Grant Program. And just as a quick reminder, this is a grant program that came out of the Infrastructure Finance Authority's state levy grant or loan program. And so this was something that going back to 2015, we helped create MCDD, the drainage districts, Levee Ready Columbia, as well as partners throughout the state, created this levy sub-account. And it started as a loan program, but it was a set aside really for modernization and recertification of levies. Because of limitations around funding and just how important this work is, going back to the 2019 session, we were able to change some of the rules around that sub-account to really create it into a grant program. And so this is, again, a set aside for levies around the state, and it is funded through 80% of it is funded through the state, through grant, and then 20% is a local match. And so it's a great opportunity. And right now they are just going through the rules. And we were able to, over the last couple of months, have a number of conversations with Business Oregon staff and have a very high level of certainty that the bond sale will be going through this spring and that we will be able to apply for these grants in time to pay for the PED contributions. And so the rules are that each district would be able to apply for up to $2 million, but there is sort of the rev limiter and that 40% of the funds in total, it's a $15 million program. 40% of those can go to urban levee districts. So in total, only 6 million of that 15 million can go to urban districts. But we will definitely be putting together packages that maximize our request of those dollars. And what we learned really just in the last couple of weeks is plotting out a path with Business Oregon to receive conditional approval for our request in time to pay for PED. So if you go to the next slide, please, Mark, just want to give a quick update on what that looks like and how that meshes up a little bit with the board's budget process. So thanks, Mark. So we need to complete some intake forms for Business Oregon. It's a pretty simple thing that really describes the project and what the request is. They will then bring it to an internal decision-making meeting, which is sort of a no or go meeting that they have every week. And that really will allow us to do the full application. So we'll have that information on December 31st, whether or not we're able to do the full information. We'll complete those by the middle of March. And we've already requested to be on the Infrastructure Finance Authority board meeting agenda for April 1st. So hopefully not an April Fool's Day joke, but I think they really are committed to having us fill out these applications and really get the funds moving. Business Oregon really is there to support all of their applicants and really want the funds that come to them to move forward and to be applied in their communities. The rest of that is contingent on the bond sale, which takes place this spring. And then we'll be working, if the IFA board approves us, we'll be working on the contract language basically at the same time the bond sale is going forward so that we can have everything in place by the end of this fiscal year and have a contract award in the summer of 2022. And this all allows the grants to be available October of 2022. And then we'll work with the Army Corps of Engineers and Business Oregon as far as the reimbursement or basically the payment of those grants or fulfillment of the invoice for the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're really excited about this opportunity. I think Business Oregon is excited to have this grant program set up and be successful. And so we will, the rest of the presentation that Mark will be presenting is based on this staff recommendation based on the state levy grants coming through. Please let me know if you have any questions about that process.
I think this is a great development. I was wondering, you say there's 6 million that's set aside for urban, or that is to say it's limited, and that would then set a maximum, if we go equal shares, of 1.5 million for each of the districts. Do we have competitors in the class of urban projects that will definitely bring that down?
Yes, so I think there's a few, not issues, really factors. So there's probably going to be an application. There's basically 2 other urban levee providers, Springfield and Salem Kaiser. Even the levee system out in Pendleton is considered rural. And so we'll want to make sure that our request maximizes what is available, but also recognizing that this is a statewide need, and so that we'll be able to sort of calibrate the request based on what we know. The other thing is that this is for the current biennium, and so grants hopefully we'll be advocating to have the grant fund replenished. So we're really focused on all of these in these budget numbers on the next 2 years. And so what is actually needed, the $1.5 million max plus a local match is sufficient for what is needed for PED. And the next few slides that Mark has that actually shows what those dollars look like, having $1 million per district requested satisfies what's needed for PED, especially with the local match considered.
Colin, I just want to quickly add, Val, to answer your question specifically, we asked that question of Business Oregon, and they said that currently they're not anticipating any other urban applications, that we're the only ones that have been actively and proactively reaching out to them. So at least right now, we're not anticipating other urban areas. And at least my advice going so far has been, we should ask for the max that we're allowed to. Business Oregon can be the one that decides how they apportion the cost, but we need to go after what we need and tell that story to them and let them decide accordingly. But it doesn't sound like they're out seeking a bunch more applications, knowing that we have this big ask coming.
I agree. We should ask for as much as we can get. Anything else that a board member wishes to say before we let the presentation continue?
Nope, just I agree. Ask for all the money you can and then let them decide.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So we'll go ahead and continue on. So there was one little bullet, if you go back one slide, Mark, it was on the bottom of this kind of updates on where we are. There we are. So the last bullet on this slide is the better understanding of the revenue picture of each district. So I said that, over the last year, we've gotten smarter as we're moving along about what's available, what the need is, and where each one of the districts is at. And so, on your agenda today, you'll be hearing from Ben around the revenue picture with the current and 5-year projection. And so Ben will get into those details, but you'll see a little bit of that in the slides that we're presenting. So I just wanted to close the loop on that slide. So Mark, if you can go skip the next one and go to the next slide.
Yeah.
There we go. So I'm going to pass it off to you. Without further ado, drum roll, please. Staff recommendation.
Great. Yeah. So I think there shouldn't be a lot of surprise at this point that about what our recommendation is going to be. We have an extremely high level of confidence that we will receive a grant, if not a very large share. We don't anticipate having any competition as discussed. And I do want to underscore that for what we need, we actually, for the PMLS PED funding, we actually only need a total of 3.3 million. So that's almost half of the 6 million that might be available to urban districts. And I'm going to show you how that breaks down. So again, we need an estimated 4.16 million for the first 2 years of PED. These grants are awarded on a biennial basis. So that's what we're looking at right now. As we said earlier, the first 2 years cover 74% of PED anyway. So this is really the big lift. So this is going to really help us get through the big lift. We could certainly have asked for, there wouldn't be enough money available to pay for the entirety of PED with what's available. However, we do have 20% cost share. So based on our calculations, that would be about $208,000 for 25% cost share. Now, Val alluded to this earlier. We are recommending an equal allocation method. That is so that we can ask for the maximum amount for each district. We don't have, if it's sort of need-based or proportional to project work, then that will just reduce the amount that some districts can actually request. So we're recommending an equal allocation method between the districts. That still leaves us with only $208,000 per district. So when you consider the 1.4 million that we had previously looked at for an equal allocation, this really brings that number down. How does that sit with PEN 2? Ben is going to provide you more detail, as Jamie alluded in his follow-on presentation, but it is well within the ability of PEN 2 to manage within, managing CIP budgets, assessment revenue and existing reserves, and he's going to provide you some recommendations on that. So again, I'm just going to say this is really great. 74% of the first 2 years of PED costs could be addressed if we get this maximum award. I think it's 67% of total PED costs would be covered in these first 2 years. Here are the numbers. Everybody wants to see the numbers. You've seen the numbers in your memo, so I kind of took the wind out of my own sails here. But 1.4 million per district. 1.4 million per district. There's years 1 and years 2. Why are those numbers different? Just because the first year of PED is the most expensive. That will be what we expect to be the biggest ask from the Corps. And then that's just offset by our cost share. So I don't know if anyone had any questions about this particular slide before I move on. It's pretty straightforward in this situation, but okay, I will take that as a no. So so again, we are highly confident that this strategy will prevail. However, we like the belt and suspenders approach. So we wanted to make sure that we had agreement on a methodology in the event that we get to that conditional approval process and Business Oregon has some bad news for us. Maybe we don't get the full amount, or we don't get anything at all, which seems, again, pretty unlikely. But we did come up with a plan B. And that plan B is here, as you saw in the memo. So the costs are distributed differently, but you'll find that the numbers, we hope that you see the numbers are significantly smaller than what you may have expected in previous discussions. The memo also outlines how we expect each district to manage into that. And again, Ben's going to go into greater detail on these costs and what sort of combination of assessment revenue and reserves and other means we are pursuing. So each district is going to have a different strategy. We have different recommendations. Ben's helped look at the numbers so that when we ask you to make a decision, you have all those numbers to consider.
And while Mark catches his breath, one thing I just want to emphasize, because when we were putting this presentation together, we hoped it was really, really clear, but we want it to be really clear that we're not asking you to choose between A and B. A is the staff recommendation and B is really a backup plan. I mean, it's a best practices approach to plan for uncertainty, to just close that gap a little bit. But we're leading with plan A.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, and we constantly want to stress that. And the good news is also we expect to hear about that conditional approval on the state grant on our plan A early enough that, as far as our budget planning process, we can still make some course corrections as needed. But again, I'm going to leave this middle bullet for Ben to discuss more, but we have looked at those and we found that we're well within our capabilities to fund Plan B if needed in Pen 2. The other thing that may have drawn your attention, we changed the cost allocation method to that composite cost allocation method that we've spoken to in the past. And again, we use the equal method for Plan A because of the ability to obtain more grant money for each district if we allocate it equally. But then shifted to something that accounts for the variability between the districts better. So.
You want to pause for questions, Mark?
Yeah.
Just to punctuate, the alternative methodology for allocation really helps ensure that MCDD, who obtains a really significant amount of the benefits of the construction projects, ends up contributing a reasonable share for those benefits. A lot of the project work will fall to Pen 1, Pen 2, and SDIC. But we think our friends in MCDD will benefit significantly from those. And that's why this methodology is recommended as a plan B if we are unsuccessful in achieving the grant funding.
I appreciate you recognizing that. As I've expressed in previous meetings, I feel strongly that the economic benefit should be included. But I do understand the logic of putting forward Plan A to get state assistance to maximize state assistance. So I personally like this idea. Put forward Plan A, see how much we can get granted. But we really need to consider the Plan B. Economic benefits is very important to me anyway. Any other comments from board members? None? One of the
This
things
looks
that I'm
great.
one of the things I haven't been terribly clear about is just how certain we are that that's going to happen. Do I understand then that the infrastructure bill has given or will give the Corps of Engineers money, and they just have to decide how they're going to allocate it? How far along are we to actually being committed that that's going to happen?
Evan, do you want to take that question?
Yeah,
Please.
sure. Thank you. So there's a couple things going on here at play. We fortunately can move into the design phase even without authorization for the project to move forward. And the Corps, our local district of the Corps that's been working on this project, is extremely supportive. They're sort of holding us up as the like star sponsor and have really been pushing this forward within the region and headquarters. So we're pretty confident that we are going to be able to move into PED, the design phase, in this coming federal fiscal year, which starts October 1, 2022. So to make sure that that happens, we're also working on getting some infrastructure bill funding to help fund all 3 years of the design phase at one time. And so that'll really help us so that we don't have to go back year after year after year, at least for the design phase, and ask for funding. If we have to, it's not the end of the world. That's what typically happens, is you fund 1 year of design at a time and you kind of fund 1 year of construction at a time. So we're confident that we're moving forward. I feel really good that we're going to get WRDA authorization in 2022. The big piece will then just be getting the funding and the New Start construction designation. So I think, yes, there's a little bit of uncertainty. There's always uncertainty when we're working with Congress and different priorities and things come up, but we're in a really, really good position. And at a minimum, should be able to get PED started and 1 year of funding to continue the design phase. But we're working on getting even more than that sort of secured at one time.
You want to share it all just about the delegation's activities and the potential testimony just one more time?
Sure. The delegation has been supporting our request to get the design phase funded through the infrastructure package. And so they've been really taking the lead with Senator Wyden as the lead, but also support from Senator Merkley and Congressman Blumenauer's office, but also DeFazio's office has been really supportive in helping us secure that funding from the infrastructure package. Jim, did you want to add something else?
Just that they've written a letter to the White House and to others asking for what Evan just described. And Congressman DeFazio is the chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and he's made it known to us that he'd like to help us. He's also let Curtis Robinhold, the director of the Port of Portland, know that he's personally interested in supporting our project. So again, we can't promise, Chair Humble, that we're going to get the funding, but all indications are we're very well positioned and we'll be continuing to work every angle we can with all of our partners to impress upon the federal government the value of their investment in our system.
Thank you. I find that all very encouraging, and I really appreciate the work of your staff in all of this lobbying and working with the state legislature and stuff. You're doing a great job. I'm impressed.
Hooray for Evan.
Well, I think we're overlooking the fact, and I've run into this in dealing with federal funding for grants, but if you know the right people and the right people like you, that's far better than being competent, almost. I mean, because there's a lot of incompetent people that get money because they know the right people.
Yeah.
And I know you can laugh, and I thought it was funny, but I actually had a federal grants manager tell me that we really like talking to you, and I'm like the least competent grant writer, but we really like talking to you, and you're nice to us. So I know that it goes far beyond that with Evan because of her knowledge and her past contacts. So great big kudos to her and the rest of the staff that have dealt with this. But I think we're very, very fortunate with the staff we have, and we wouldn't be in this position if we didn't have that staff.
Thank you. We have a wonderful lobbyist, so I can't take all the credit. Julie Minerva out in DC is by far one of the most talented lobbyists I've ever worked with. So
Yeah,
well served.
that personal connection, as it is true with all of us, is far greater. You want to do something for the people you like and that are competent. So
So if
there
I can-
is a human side to federal employees.
I guess I do want to punctuate that we've been in touch really directly with a variety of really senior leaders at the city of Portland, and they're working on extra contribution from the city for Pen 1. Again, it's not final till the city council approves it. Similarly, our partners at the Port of Portland are aware that they may need to support Pen 1, and similarly, Metro is also working with us. So again, we're getting local support where necessary as well. So we have a really great community coalition who's moving this project forward. So I think we're as well positioned as we can be.
So did staff want a stronger statement from the board supporting your plan to go with the B backup plan B, or are you satisfied with what we said?
Well, I think we're all pretty satisfied. I'm speaking for others, but we will be coming to you next month with an actual resolution to sort of codify that, coming to all the boards for that, just to sign and seal a commitment to that recommendation. So certainly, if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to entertain them. But we think this is a good plan moving forward with all this new information and this confidence that we have in our plan B.
Okay. Anything from Karen or Kathy that you want to say before we move on? Okay, are we ready then for item F on the agenda, financial forecast?
We just
Chair Humble, we have just like 2 more slides if we can, just to wrap up.
Go for it.
Is that all right? Mark, you want to? So just to put back in front of you the 18-month timeline, this is the one that we keep showing you. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that are coming up, we're just going to continue to come to your board meetings and provide you updates about everything as we're moving forward. And as Mark said, we will be coming to the format in February with the draft resolution once we get through all the board conversations this month to have everyone, put a bow on the direction that we're headed moving forward. So Mark, is there anything you want to highlight just in terms of what they can expect in terms of presentations coming up, or
just looking at that winter block, I just wanted to let them know, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be bringing them updates on the task force discussions with the city of Portland, which that's a forum for some of these resource sharing that we're talking about. We're also having outside meetings with the city and Port and Metro to discuss resource sharing. We're also starting to continue our work prepping for PED, so work on the hazardous toxic radioactive waste topic, which fortunately is currently just one site, so it doesn't sound so ominous. But we'll be doing a reintroduction on that topic once we get results back from our consultant after they've looked at the Corps' work. And as always, we continue to work on real estate and those issues, and just build our portfolio of awareness on that. So we're going to try to keep this schedule up to date, and so that you can see all the things that are ongoing.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the last slide we have. So appreciate Chair Humble you giving us another minute to wrap up, and we'll look forward to our conversations with the format in February. and look forward to continued updates on this project throughout the coming year. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Now that I've given you guys the bum's rush, I guess we're ready for the financial forecast.
Good morning. This is Ben Rowe, budget manager, and I'm still claiming the new guy card, so I'm still new to the district. So please excuse any discrepancies that I might present. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your time this morning. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the budget calendar, a review of the budget priorities that we presented in November, and I think we also touched on them in December. We can touch briefly on the current year financials if there's any last questions, and then we'll move right on into the forecast. So looking at the calendar, today, Tuesday the 18th, we have board meetings for Pen 1 and Pen 2. We're presenting the financial forecast to all the boards this month. Staff will be required to submit their budget proposals in February, and then we'll be back before the boards in April to present a proposed budget. So currently for Pen 2, that's presented in April, Tuesday, April 12th. And then we'll be back in May to approve the budget. If there's any additional information or additional meetings that we need along those timelines, we will schedule them. And we're also looking at continuing the budget liaison practice that we have in past years. So Emily will be reaching out to schedule a meeting with whoever your appointed budget liaison is, probably about 2 weeks prior to this Tuesday, April 12th meeting. Any questions on the calendar before we move on? As we look at the budget priorities, this is a very high-level summary of the priorities that we presented in November. These values are reflective of the latest values that Evan presented to the boards, I believe, last month. And just looking at this high level, our priorities going into 2022-23 are really safety oriented and just continuing our core mission, as well as standing up the new urban flood safety and water quality district, as well as our equity goals and priorities. So if we need any more discussion, or if you want to see more on the priorities as we move forward, I'll be sure to incorporate these into our conversations in the near future. These are the financials that were included in your packet for this month, and we plan to prepare these and deliver them to each board each month. So if there's any questions or anything specific that you wanted to hear or know about the financials, I'd be happy to dig into those. I'll just point out a few things here that we ended the year, these are approximations. We ended the year in 2020-21 with just over $2 million in reserves, and that's combined reserves, both designated, undesignated, and you'll see that in your forecast in a second. Your revenues are looking really good, and we're underspending our expected budget in a few areas, mainly due to logistic slowdowns and COVID, all things impacted by COVID. As we go into the forecast, I have two forecasts prepared for you today. The assumptions for both of these forecasts are identical. So I assumed a 7% assessment increase each year. And as your budget manager, I would recommend that would be the floor of the assessment increase that I would recommend based on our forecast and also the uncertainty that we have ahead of us over the next couple of years. So what this represents, the blue line represents our reserves. And as I just pointed out, we have just over $2 million at the close of 2021. And that represents approximately 2.5 times our annual operating expenditures. So our annual operating expenses in Pen 2 are around $800,000. This Plan A forecast represents receiving the grant fund from the state, as Mark and Evan and Jamie and Colin presented. And then the yellow portion right here, hopefully you can see my cursor, represents the cost that Pen 2 would actually contribute towards the PED costs in 2023 and then also fiscal year 2024. Again, these are rounded figures, and so they reconcile with the dollars that Mark just presented in the memo. And then the blue, the light blue, represents, these would be the amounts that the grant would contribute towards those PED costs. And as you can see by our forecast, assuming that 7% increase in our assessments each year with the grant receipt and paying those PED costs through 2025, our reserves would last through 2025, the close of 2025. That would be June 30, 2025 at $1.8 million. And that's approximately, and I may have misspoke before, but that's just over 2 times our annual operating expenditures for the district. Any questions on the Plan A financial forecast before we move on to Plan B? Okay. So with Plan B, a slightly different story. Again, assuming a 7% increase in assessments each year. However, our PED costs that the district would pick up in this scenario would be much greater. You can see those here. And with this scenario, through June 30, 2025, we would conclude 2025 with only 1 times operating expenditures in reserves. One thing that I didn't show on the forecast here is 2026. There is a very significant increase in the PED costs in 2026, and that greatly or significantly skews the forecast. So I kept the future years off of this forecast. But I believe that this forecast will get us to the implementation of the new district. That concludes my my material. Would be happy to entertain any discussion or questions about the 2 scenarios that I shared.
No questions? That Plan B of yours, does that the allocation reflect the equal allocation per district or the Plan B allocation method?
So this represents the composite PED cost distribution. So very good question. So this is the 50-50% split. So 50% project costs and the 50% of benefit. Thank you. And then just to back up one, Plan A represents the equal PED cost distribution.
Thank you.
Yep.
Nothing else? Okay. Item G on the agenda says sponsorship criteria.
Hi, that's me. My name is Aster Moulton. I've been with the drainage districts for about 5 months as a public affairs and community relations specialist. Been working on a lot of different outreach and communications activities with the drainage districts, including our sponsorship program. I'll give you a brief update on some proposed changes we have to that sponsorship program today. And just to give you a little background, we've been managing this program for about 5 years. As the drainage districts became more concerned with community relations and education, we implemented this program. And it's really important as a mechanism for cultivating community partnerships. It provides unique networking opportunities. And it also, for us, is an opportunity to provide flood risk education to the local community. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I share the right screen. All right, are you seeing a presentation?
Yeah.
Awesome, great. Okay, so moving on. Oh, 1 second. Let me get my controls ready. So yeah, this briefing, we're hoping to bring some clarity about how we are streamlining the events and sponsorship budget line item. And that's the budget line item that the sponsorship program is funded through. And we're also hoping to give you some updates on our recent efforts to bring more structure and transparency to the sponsorship program. This is an introduction today where we'll answer any preliminary questions you have, and we're hoping to go into more detail next month to get board approval for the general policy direction. Yeah, so first things to know about the sponsorship program, as I mentioned, it's funded through the events and sponsorship budget line item, which is really small. Penn 2's budget this fiscal year is just over $15,000. Combined through all 4 districts, it is just over $33,000. A lot of things have been folded into this budget line item, has included district hosted events, tabling event fees, educational partnerships, and traditional sponsorships. All that to say that way more than just sponsorships has been included in this budget line item. As I mentioned, the first thing we would like to do is streamline what is funded through events and partnerships so that it's only district hosted events such as Bike the Levees, as well as traditional sponsorships. And when we're talking about traditional sponsorships, we mean when an agency supports another organization's mission without receiving a direct benefit outside of marketing and networking opportunities. I mentioned that we've funded educational partnerships through this budget line item. We think that's distinct from partnerships because, from sponsorships, because with those partnerships, there's usually a mutual benefit. And so an example of that is our partnership with the Columbia Slough Watershed Council to provide flood risk education to schools in the Columbia Slough watershed. So partnerships like that, as well as tabling event fees, would be recategorized in our community outreach and education line item. So that's what's remaining once again would be traditional sponsorships as well as district hosted events. Probably more importantly is our efforts to establish criteria to make sure that sponsorship decisions are relevant to the drainage district's activities, missions, and values, including our new equity policy. Something to note here is oftentimes public agencies will have community advisory committees to help facilitate funding selection. And we think the small size of this program doesn't warrant the additional staff capacity that would be needed to manage a committee like that. That said, we do want to create more structure and transparency in this program, which is why we want to establish some concrete criteria. So I'm not going to go over the details of this criteria at this meeting. I'll go into greater detail next month, but here's a quick overview. It's on an 11-point scale. It considers things like geographical relevancy, equity, flood education, operational relevancy, and the relationship, meaning is this an emerging relationship with the drainage districts or or a continuing relationship. The process would be fairly simple. Each requesting organization would fill out a short form, the questions of which would reflect this criteria, and then MCDD staff would make a scoring determination. And the potential funding would be based on that score. So the higher the score, the higher the potential funding, and things that score low, and we're proposing less than 5, we would consider not funding. Other proposed changes, one proposed change is that board members and staff would no longer be submitting sponsorship requests. Instead, if you are a part of an organization that would like to receive sponsorship funds, we would ask that someone else from that organization submit that request, so that there's no appearance of any conflict of interest. And we're working with our legal team on this effort in hopes that that reduces any potential power dynamics. And so the next step, as I mentioned, would be to go into more detail next month, seek your approval on this policy direction, and then of course answer any clarifying questions you have. That's all I have for you. I tried to keep it nice and brief so that we would have time for any questions. And yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll speak up first because this has been near and dear to my heart for a long time, as a lot of people know. And I'm a part of that board member and sponsorship because of the Vanport Place Marking Project. And I have advocated for the non-involvement or participation. So I'm glad you came up with, you did a lot of great work. And I know we've had conversations. So I think this looks like a more open and transparent process. And I think that I want the drainage districts to be more involved, but I've said this a lot of time, we also have to weigh, and I don't know how that can happen, but if staff does it, but we have to weigh, and you said it's not much money, but $2,000 to a nonprofit is a lot of money in a lot of instances. And so we have to weigh the benefit to the recipient for, like you said, tabling events, all that, the extra expense in a lot of that. I mean, 500 programs, a project might not be able to do that, but if we're able to and to promote their efforts, like the Columbia Sioux Watershed Council is so closely aligned with a lot of the drainage districts. So I don't know if there's a way to weigh benefit in any of that. And I will go, just because it's me and I can say this, the Vanport Place Marking Project's putting signs in the ground. Is it more important to put signs in the ground than inform people of flood risk and safety? I don't think so. And so I hope that whoever does the evaluation part of it, or if there's some parameter in there that the benefit to the public and to the, and you do have to the mission, but I fully support providing the money to not so much promote great cultural, I mean, and this will sound weird, but the cultural history is handled in another fashion, in another way with the urban flood safety. And so if we can focus this money on providing people with flood safety, I would like to see that be a #1 priority.
Yeah, thanks for those thoughts. Flood safety, flood education is baked into the criteria. And I will say that with the scoring, it's very specific, as you'll see next month, about, you know, why something would get an 8 versus a 9. So hopefully there wouldn't be too much in the way of staff discretion when it comes to that scoring. We're trying to bake transparency into that process that way. And I also really appreciate you saying that, like, even though this is a small amount of money, you know, $500, $1,000 could go a long way. And I think that just like underlines the importance of this process.
So this is great to see. I think this clarity will be much appreciated by partners. And I guess my only question at this time is really, are you anticipating doing like an open solicitation once a year, all the funds then get earmarked for the fiscal year, or would it be on a rolling basis?
I think at this point, it would be on a rolling basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just one comment on that. That makes it a first come, first serve situation. So maybe take that into consideration, because smaller organizations might not know about it or get a need or have an express need. So somehow fit that into people that have received funding in the past that may get caught up in that. For, you know, if you set a limit of 33,000 and you use it all in the first 10 weeks of the year, then you might not be able to, or you can expand the amount, something like that. But I think maybe having an open announcement that this money is available and get your requests in now would be more, I know Kathy might have comments on this too, but would be better to plan for future events than holding off and asking, 2 months before the event, and then find out that the funds aren't available. They've already been spent.
Yeah, I don't know that there is there's not a perfect way to do it. But for those organizations like the Watershed Council that really had come to rely upon those district partnership funds, being able to put a 70 to 90% probability on those funds when budgeting for the new year can make or break an individual program. And so either having a single solicitation or award cycle that apportions all the available dollars for the year in one fell swoop, or setting aside, a quarterly amount. So divvying it up by 4 and having a solicitation 4 times a year, whatever, something that provides that kind of transparency, accountability for you internally, but also makes it much easier for these very small grassroots nonprofits to plan.
Yeah, and I wanted to add something really quickly there, Kathy and Mary Helen, and I'd appreciate if you all have thoughts. Aster and I have talked about this a fair amount, and one of the things that I feel is really important for organizations like the Watershed Council that we not, right now our current approach is we earmark every dollar and plan on how we're going to spend it in the budget. And I don't want to shed that completely, because A, it provides us a plan, and B, we like to be able to provide a surety to to our partners like at the Watershed Council. The other part of it, though, is that we're sort of starting to parse out and recognize the difference between long-term partnerships and the programming that we develop with our long-term partners and sponsorship dollars. So for instance, the flood education program that the Watershed Council provides to students, that we fund them, we fund the purchase of the model, and then we fund programming every year. We'll budget for that in a different line item so that we know that flood risk education is provided on a regular basis as part of our programming. And so the sponsorship dollars will be what, kind of what we need to work out. Sorry, Aster, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say I really appreciate those suggestions. And so, yeah, we can think of ways to make sure that these funds are available, not just to the people who've always received them, whether that's, an annual open solicitation or quarterly. Yeah, so we'll definitely take that into consideration. And I also wanted to forgot to mention in my presentation that, this sponsorship, this process will be, relevant for the next 1 to 2 years until the new district is operational, and we'll revisit the criteria and process at that time. I think it's probably more likely that we'll have some kind of community selection committee, not just for the sponsorship programs, but also for our larger, the larger projects in general. Yeah, so just wanted to mention that this is kind of like our interim solution for building in some structure and transparency.
That's great. Thank you. And Evan, that clarification was helpful because those are really distinct types of programming, and seeing the long-term partnerships follow a different track than event sponsorships will be really helpful. Yeah. And Evan, your baby's so cute.
Yeah, I'm trying to see.
Say hi, Naomi. Hi.
Oh.
She doesn't want to take her jacket off.
Oh, she's got a big smile though.
Well, it's so cute. I wouldn't want to take it off either.
Well,
Thanks,
Mr.
Jen.
Chair, if I may, I think this is one of the first times Astor's been able to present before you, but Astor's also been instrumental in the progress we've been making in partnerships on homeless camps and homeless activity, and has been just a terrific asset in supporting our operations team. And they're really bringing really great best practices from work with TriMet and other jobs, and just really, you're all very fortunate that Astor is part of the team. So thank you, Astor.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. All right, are there any more questions?
Okay.
All right. Well, it was nice talking to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I guess our executive director now has the floor.
Okay, I'll try and get you out early. First, I think we maybe should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, but we have a new board coordinator, and that is Wendy Lynn, who just showed herself. And welcome, Wendy. Wendy comes to us fairly recently from being deputy director at Business for a Better Portland, which, if you are unfamiliar with them, they're a really terrific organization, really trying to organize businesses to support the community here in Portland. She also is the former executive director of a not-for-profit in the Ashland area called Thrive that worked on food issues. And again, very community-driven work there. She has extensive experience working on best practices for boards and training for boards, implementing streamlining of rulemakings and other things to keep us all communicating effectively. And she started, I think, today. So this is part of our move to really staff up the work to start the new utility up. And so Emily will be transitioning some of her time over to being a project manager for all things new utility, holding that clipboard and keeping us all organized and moving forward. So we're really excited to have Wendy join us today, and to also have a little bit more of Emily's time focused on the big prize, which is a bigger district with more ratepayers and a more modern and better safety for all the landowners. Wendy, did you want to say anything?
I'm just really excited to be here. So thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, just diving into a meeting my first day. So it's fun to meet everyone. I look forward to getting to know all of you on the boards and staff. So thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you for your interest in our work, and we're excited to have you. A couple of other things, as you know, our bill to make small administrative amendments to the new utilities authorities got introduced, and we expect to be participating in a hearing in the next few weeks. And we should know, because it's a brief session, whether we're going to be successful in advancing that, as Evan shared earlier, by the end of February. All indications are that there's not opposition to the bill. So, anything could happen with all the changes in leadership in the legislature. But I think people in general are very supportive of helping our community really establish this new utility and creating a more resilient system. As you heard, we'll be testifying before Congress and our attempts to win federal investment in our system. I won't belabor that. As you heard, we are also recruiting still for 2 vacancies on the urban board. So once again, if you have suggestions or maybe you're interested, let us know and we can connect you with Mike Jordan, the chair of that board. It's possible that we've heard from a few people on different boards that there's some interest in a discussion about changing meeting dates. We're not committing to that yet, but just a heads up that we may be doing a big scheduling mambo with all of you to see if we can accommodate everyone to the degree that we can. I'm hoping we won't have to impact you all, but just a heads up. I also want to let you know that the Revenue Development Subcommittee of the Urban Board had a meeting last week, and they were discussing different revenue options for the new utility to move from a conceptual phase into an analysis phase, to put into a model that's going to allow people to see who would pay how much under different scenarios. One of the things that the subcommittee recommended was that they incorporate a permanent property tax levy and a temporary property tax levy. Those run about 5 years into the modeling. And there was some conflict around that and a split vote. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that. And again, we have an urban board meeting today where the full board will consider the recommendation from the subcommittee. Things that I need you to know right now is that that proposal would only move into an analysis phase. There's no decisions made about which revenue model. The other thing that I want you to know is that even under an amended bill that we're working on now, the urban district does not have authority to levy a permanent property tax or a temporary property tax. So we would need to go to the 23 session to get that changed. And so we'll see how it goes. I think there was a pretty thoughtful discussion about the costs and benefits and politics around that, but I think we're going to manage it successfully. And I think it's probably thoughtful to look at a bunch of different options. And I just would say that the property tax one is under consideration by the urban board, and it has a complicated path to get implemented. And it may not be something that happens in the near term, but maybe worth considering down the road. And then last, I want to give you a little update on safety and security of the staff. We continue to have patrols on campus every evening and on weekends to protect the security of our facility. Since we did that, we've not had any break-ins or any damage. The Portland police were successful in apprehending a suspect. Since that happened, there's been no activity, which we're excited about. We don't know how much of that is the apprehension, how much of that is our security, but we're happy that our doors to our shed have not been bashed in and no equipment's been stolen. And I think more importantly, we've made real progress at Pump Station 4. We have armed security escorting our staff there on a regular schedule now, so that pump station is functional and operational. Been able to manage all the incoming rain and all the issues associated with that caused some challenges for us over Veterans Day. And I'm happy to report that while there's still a lot more work to do and we still have safety and security threats, particularly for our operations team, we're working really closely with that team. And at this point, I think they are aware of all of our efforts and are willing to go do the work that we need to do to keep people dry. And so again, good progress. We continue to coordinate with the port and the city of Portland and with the Joint Office of Homeless Services to continue to make progress on cleanup and camp removal where appropriate. So you've seen some progress along the 205 levee, and more is in the works. And you've seen some progress on the cross levee and at Schmear Road, and that'll continue to happen. So I would say this is a long-term issue for us, but we're making slow, steady progress. And I'm happy to report that our ops team members feel supported enough that they're willing to go to some of those facilities where in the past it's been structurally really dangerous for them. We continue to work with the the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and some private consultants on other actions we can take for our team, bringing more situational awareness and de-escalation training to the team. They are wearing ballistic vests in certain circumstances. And then finally, when it comes to safety, we have amended our internal policies around COVID to conform with the latest CDC and Multnomah County health recommendations. So once again, we are requiring staff to travel separately in cars. We are discouraging attendance at the office, despite the fact that Emily's there today. And when people are there, they need to be very separate or wearing N95 or KN95 or equivalent masks, which we'll be providing to staff. And we've also provided an additional 40 hours of sick leave to staff because we've had a lot of people really impacted either by being exposed and being required to quarantine or by having closures associated with daycares or schools. So we've been trying to be flexible with our employees, some of whom can't work from home because the nature of their work requires them to be in the field. So we're working hard to manage the situation and keep everyone safe and healthy and maintain the awesome group of employees that we have running our system today within our means. So I think with that, it is a little late and I better stop talking.
Can I just say one thing? Because I heard Karen say yay when you talked about the property tax consideration. I think that there was some, and tell me if I'm wrong, strong opposition to the property tax from several members of other drainage districts who were opposed. And
we've done
so
some.
I don't know that it's gonna fly. I mean, really, I mean, but there was also strong support to explore it. But I represented the idea that most of the neighbors that I've talked to would be opposed to an increased property tax and that there should be other funding. And that came from my conversations as people walked by on the street 6 feet away with their masks. We did all that. Most of which didn't even know what the drainage district was. Several were renters. They had no idea, that sort of thing. But they all expressed they didn't want to have additional funds be attached just to property owners and not all things considered. So
yeah, we'll see what the
I
urban
just
board
want,
does.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we did some significant outreach to those East County representatives. It was mostly the East County folks, and tried to make sure they understood the details of what was happening. And we'll see. We've also made a really strong commitment to elevate their voices at the board meeting later today.
Right.
Kathy, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering what seats, you said there are 2 vacancies on the district. Are those designated seats, stakeholder or property interest?
One is a social justice oriented not-for-profit, and the other would be a not-for-profit with an interest in the floodplain. Neither of them need to be located in the floodplain. They need to be located inside the urban district or have an interest in it. So those are the ones that we're looking for. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I wanted you all to know about the vote on the property tax because you may hear about it from some stakeholders or constituents that you speak with. So we'll update you after the vote today, or if there is a vote, and we'll keep you posted on the progress.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Karen.
I'm wondering if anything is being done or can be done about the new home that's being built on the levee just west of the 205 bridge.
Bill, you want to jump in on that? Are you still with us? I see your name is still here. I know we went and inspected things, and we've been doing outreach to some of the folks who are building. Is this an actual permitted new home, or is it the campers? Just to clarify.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm just not. I wanted to make
It
sure
looks
whether we're
like-
talking about campers or whether we're talking about a permitted home.
Right. It's campers, obviously, but they're building stick houses with sheathing on the outside. It looks like roofing is ready to go next.
So what we've done is we've worked with many of the other agencies that have an operational need to access the levees, and we've developed a prioritized list of sites. And we're now preparing to sit down with the Portland Police Bureau to walk through that. They have limited capacity, so we need to set up projects that have a beginning and an end so that they can get the overtime organized. And we're working also with the Impact Reduction Program, the Joint Office of Homeless Services, to do outreach before we take action at any of these sites. We've spoken with Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who has PBOT. She understands that vehicles on critical infrastructure are not okay, so she's authorized PBOT to engage in more outreach and towing. And then once we can get a site cleaned up, the other thing we need to do is convene with all the people who need access to that site later and develop a security and access control plan, so that all the agencies have the capability to get in there when they need to. Currently, we're using a lot of eco blocks, which are those big concrete Legos, and it requires a crane to move those to access it with a vehicle. So we're looking for some alternative solutions. What I think you're going to see is over the next 4 to 6, 8 months is that we'll be chunking through each of those sites. We'll be doing additional cleanup. Again, Astor has worked with Solve to do some volunteer additional cleanups. And as soon as those sites are cleaned up, we'll engage in inspections, and ideally we'll have a security and access control plan in place. So that as soon as the cleaning happens, we can get in there with our partners and place the boulders, rocks, blocks, bollards, whatever it takes to minimize additional access. So again, it's going to take time, and more people will repopulate. We're trying to stay on top of it once things are cleaned up. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one comment about cleanup, and you don't have to respond, but Astor, if you've had any contacts with Terrence Moses and Neighbors Helping Neighbors, he does cleanups all over the area. And access to funding and a nonprofit, all of those things. So
Yeah, I've attempted to reach out to Terrence. He's honestly a little hard to get a hold of.
yes,
Had one
So-
meeting scheduled with him, but we'll yeah, I think that is a worthwhile partnership to pursue, and so we'll keep
okay.
trying.
I'll send you the woman's name who does all of the Neighbors Helping Neighbors, Pat Opdyke.
Mhm.
She does kind of the bookwork, keeping track of Terrence, because he doesn't like to even leave her notes of where he's going or what he's doing, but she handles all the funding and that sort of thing. So I'll send you an email and copy her, and because he seems to be far more successful and responsive than city programs. And he's got to deal with Metro, and I don't know how it all works, but it would be a valuable contact for small, not, he does dumpsters along 33rd. So, okay.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, Bill's posted a chat. There was a new camp growing near Schmear Road, and they actually proactively contacted us, and we partnered up with them to help let folks know it was not a safe place to camp. And Bill, I think I'm correct that we got him to move along. So we're seeing more activity from all of our partners, is the truth. And I think coming out of the pandemic, and people are staffing up just like we are with our contracts and so on. But like many places, hiring the folks to do the work and getting the contracts done and all the related supply chain in broad sense are impacting all of this work.
Is there anything else? Any new business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all for your service.